Has Desmond Ritter proven that he's the guy? Or do we still need to see more from him in week 18? We'll be asking Jarvis Davis of the ATL Day Ones podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, on today's episode, as well as which of the Falcons' impending free agents have earned new deals. Caleb McGarry, Olamide Zaccheaus, Rashawn Evans, Isaiah Oliver. We'll break that down with Jarvis on today's episode.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, and, of course, the very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Falcons is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts, and we thank you guys for making a Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Of course, it's free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including on YouTube and also on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta. Download the app Locked On Sports Atlanta on your Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So I am here, of course, with Jarvis Davis, one of the co-hosts of the ATL Day Ones podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family, your team every day. And we're here as usual to wrap up the week. This is our final time, Jarvis, where you come on and give us the key to victory for the 2023 season, although we will see quite a bit more of you in the off season as we get geared up for, the 2022 season for the 2023 season. But Jarvis, what for you is the key to victory for this Falcons team heading into this week 18 matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
If I can just start with keep it very simple, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. First game, we saw some issues with Desmond Ritter, right? In second game, we saw a little improvement in different areas as far as, developing a chemistry with Drake London. I think that when you think about going to, we would have a little issue with that. We like the chemistry, but we wanted to spread the ball around a little bit more. And I think he did that in game number 3, and it led to his first win at home as a starting quarterback. And I think that in game 4, I think the main thing for him is to continue to develop those guys, develop the chemistry with the guys around him. And I know we're going to talk about those guys who's going to be around him a little bit later on in the show. But I think that the guys that are here right now on this squad, I think he needs to continue to develop some type of chemistry. So, hey, he can find those guys and from a game time standpoint and is continue to feed the rock to Tyler Algier. I think that's the thing that Arthur Smith has found. And I think that's something that is going to continue to be a good go-to for him. And I like seeing Cordell Patterson line up out at wide receiver. I think it gives a different dynamic to this offense, and it opens it up some. So you could throw some things at a Ty Bowl defense who likes to send that different types of pressures. So you can get into a lot of different formations when you have guys who's versatile they can line up at the running back or the wide receiver position.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see sort of how Ritter fares against this tough Bucs defense. But then, who knows if the Bucs are going to put all their stars out there. So maybe it won't be as tough, but you're kind of hoping to see Desmond Ritter kind of build off of the success he particularly had last week. And, this will be a really great test because he's not going to be on the road. So that's a favorable situation for him. Again, this may not be the Bucs defense sort of at full go. So it will still be a challenge for him, but obviously maybe not the biggest challenge. So this will be an opportunity, I think, for Desmond Ritter to kind of put it all together and really sort of put his stamp on whether or not he's going to be the guy heading into next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about, right? That's why I think once the Falcons figured out, hey, more than likely we aren't going to make the playoffs this year, or our chances are slim to none. Let's make a move. Let's make a move. And I think that as Desmond Ritter goes along, and I'm not sitting up here saying that Desmond Ritter is going to be the guy. Well, 5 to 6 years from now. I'm not saying that, but I will say he's making pretty good case for him to be the guy in 2023 and allow the Falcons to build around him, which we know that they need to build around him. And not necessarily on that side of the football. I'm talking about on the defensive side of the football, because pass rushers matter. Hashtag pass rushers matter.
Okay.
So I'm starting campaigns today, man.
I got you.
I don't know where that came from, but I'm starting campaigns, man. Hashtag pass rushers matter, man. Like,
Okay. Well, look,
that's
I
I hate
have
to get political on you, but like that's how I'm feeling. I felt that in my spirit, man. So I had to let it go.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm a special teams matter guy. You could be the pass rushers matter guy. I got you. I got you on that.
Right.
But we'll continue the conversation here with Jarvis Davis, talking a little bit more about sort of building around Desmond Ridder, and if he is that guy for 2023. And then we'll talk a little bit more later on the episode about some of the free agents that are headed to potentially the open market, and who are the guys that have sort of made their name so far this season and may need to make their name into this final game in week 18 to sort of earn a new contract from the Falcons. We'll get into all of that as we continue today's episode, but I gotta plug the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast, right, where you can find shows like ATL Day Ones, hosted by none other than Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste, breaking down not only the local sports but also national sports, all on the same podcast feed. And Locked On Sports Atlanta is the place to go, guys, for your postcast on Sunday, immediately after the final whistle on YouTube, where you can check out Jarvis Davis and myself breaking down all the action from Sunday's game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And guys, I want to tell you all about our sponsor, PrizePicks. They present a fun new way to play daily fantasy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. It takes less than a minute to enter, and the great thing about PrizePicks is not you versus other people, it's just you versus the projections. They offer projections not only on the NFL, but NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, esports, everything. PrizePicks is safe, it's fast, it's easy. It's currently in operation in over 30 states in the US and Canada. And all you got to do to play is download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com and sign up. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That means if you deposit $100, they will give you another 100 to play with. Don't forget to use that promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. So continuing today's episode, Jarvis, you've already sort of stated that you feel like Desmond Ridder has done enough to be in consideration to be the starter next year, or are you willing to sort of call it? Are you willing to stop the count at this point in time? Not to get too political here, but is Desmond Ridder the Falcons' Week 1 starter? You're ready to say that now, or do you still need to see a little bit more?
To be honest with you, I'm willing to say that he will be the starter in week 1 with a little caveat, right? I think that I do think it makes sense for them to bring in a veteran to push him, to a guy who will be willing to work with him and kind of be that sounding board, just in case he may have some questions about the particular offense and everything like that. So I don't, because here's the thing, if I think that Desmond Ridder is a guy that can be serviceable for you, a guy that can not necessarily light up the scoreboard from a stats and numbers perspective. But one thing that I have seen that I've been pretty pleased with is the fact that in money downs, and I like to call it the drive against the Arizona Cardinals, when he was making those big throws, when he play action, turn his back to the defense, quickly snap his head around and zip the ball in there to Michael Pruitt on 3rd down to get a first down and keep that drive going, and then eventually kicking a field goal with no time left on the clock. And I think that's important in 2 ways, right? Because you save your defense from having to make another stop. 2, you also get it to the point where you have to make those plays, because Arizona knew what they were doing. There were even some guys who was going to let Tyler Algier ran into the end zone. So those are some of the things that you got to have to take a look at when you evaluating guys, whether or not he can be clutch and money downs, and also know the situation. Situational football, the little things, right? And making sure that he's confident in the huddle. He even talked about it this week as far as knowing that he can't come into the huddle stuttering on the play calls and all that stuff. All those little things that people take for granted when you have a veteran quarterback, he's doing those things. He's doing those things that people don't necessarily have to worry about, so they can have confidence in him, the other 10 guys, that is, that he can make the plays. So I think that, with him doing those and then putting those things on display, and pretty much in every game that he's played in, I think that he'll be fine there because, like you said, the Falcons have established identity this year, and I was looking at some of the numbers just from a rushing standpoint, just being up in the top 5 and total rushing yards and yards per carry. Those are things that are very important to teams late in the season, meaning teams that can run the ball really well late in the season are normally teams who can go into the playoffs. But unfortunately, that's not the case for the Falcons this year. But when you look at those teams that end up going and finishing off the games late in the season, that's a quality that most of those teams have. And I think that if you can get to a point where you have a quarterback that can make necessary plays and not have to be the guy making plays, I think you should be looking at that guy and saying, okay, we know what we have in this guy, and we know that we can go into the 2023 season with him at the quarterback and worry about other stuff. Hashtag pass rush matters.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about some of that other stuff because I look at the team. Obviously, the running game works. It does feel like they have competent quarterback play. Again, I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's ready to declare Desmond Ritter up there with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes and all those guys as
Not at all.
yeah. But like, can he give you league average to above average quarterback play? Given your offensive identity being a run football team, that you're not in a situation when we get into a 3rd and 7 or a 3rd and 5 or a 3rd and 10 and you feel like, oh well, this is a punt, right? Like
Right,
that's what it
exactly,
felt
yeah.
like earlier in the season. It doesn't feel like that anymore, and hopefully we'll see continued progress there. But I look at this team and I say, obviously I think the big need that they need to improve upon is the defense. That being able to get stops and have trust in that defense can change how you play offensively. And then when you change how you play offensively, meaning that you can throw the ball a lot more and you don't have to rely so much on running the football. When you do throw the ball a lot more, then you need to get more explosive playmakers out there, next to Cordero Patterson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, and Olamide Zaccheaus, and Tyler Algier, and all these guys, get a little bit more juice in this offense so that if you do find yourself falling into a hole, you can find your way to climb back out of it. Would you agree with that, Jarvis?
Absolutely, because that's the thing that you know that people like ask a lot of questions. Coming into the season, a lot of times you don't hear the head coach of the team, who's also the offensive coordinator, come in and say, 60% of our offensive lineman spots are up for grabs. And we want to be able to run the football down your throats, even when people know they're doing it. Like, that's a hard sentence to put together. As you come into the season, when you're talking about what your goals are coming into the season, and what the Falcons were able to do, which I think is, I'm pretty confident in saying this, is that they went to that bad boy down to about 20% now, right? Because and the only reason I'm saying that is because a guy like Elijah Wilkinson, who was fine, who was serviceable, he can't stay healthy. So you had a rotation of guys going in there from Kobe Gossett and now Matt Hennessy. So all of those guys have had opportunities to play in that left guard spot, even Chuma Edoga. So you had quite a revolving door at that spot. So you were able to solidify, the center position, regardless of how I feel. I feel some type of way about Drew Dalman. I think he can be lacking sometimes and from a blocking standpoint, but the Falcons seem to be pretty satisfied with that. And I'm really interested to see what they do at that left guard spot. Are they going to allow Elijah Wilkinson to come back and bring him back to compete? or are they pretty satisfied with Matt Hennessy? He's from the previous regime, so that's a decision that they're going to have to make. So I think that, but the main thing though, I think that within all of that, they were able to establish themselves. Hey, we'll run first team. We're going to be one of the from a number standpoint, we're going to be one of the highest attempted rushing team in the league, and they were up there for sure. I think they were third, I believe. So when you have that type of identity and you be able to say, this is what we want to do, and they were able to accomplish that, I think that's a good foundational piece to be able to move forward and work on this defense, because we all know that that's what they need to do.
Yes. Absolutely. So you mentioned Elijah Wilkinson, and he is one of many potential or current starters that are potential free agents after this season with expiring contracts. And we'll pick your brain, Jarvis, as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons on some of these guys that are starters, that are impending free agents. Who are the guys that have earned a second contract heading into this offseason? We'll get into all of that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. And now, guys, I want to tell you about the number one source for your sports betting info. And that is, of course, betonline.net, where you can find your sports betting info, your stats, your news, your analysis. And I know you're in the podcast, so you can find those as well at betonline.net. They give you the latest trends and odds for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, esports, hockey, tennis, all that and more. They got you covered at betonline.net. And if you're just looking for this weekend's action in the NFL, they got all the lines there, including the Falcons, where the Falcons are 4-point favorites against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can also bet the over-under 40.5 over at betonline.net. If you think Blaine Gabbert's going to play a bunch, maybe you take the under. If you think we'll see quite a bit of Tom Brady, maybe you take the over. Whatever you want to do, head on over to the website at betonline.net. Use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, guys, we're wrapping up Locked On Falcons here with Jarvis Davis of ATL Day Ones. And really thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen. Always check out Locked On NFL for your second listen, giving you that breakdown on all the teams all week long on Locked On NFL. Subscribe to Locked On NFL on your preferred podcast platform, including on YouTube. So, Jarvis, one thing that I know you're well aware of, and I'm sure many of the people watching and listening to us are well aware of, the Falcons have a whole bunch of one-year contracts on this roster, right? Over the cap, there's 24 players currently on the Falcons that are set to be unrestricted free agents after the season. That's basically half the 53-man roster is basically on one-year contracts, and several of those guys are starters. Now, I have a list of 7 guys that I would consider starters, and Jarvis, I'm going to name them and then give you the floor to make your case on why you think they should be brought back. And you can say no to all of them, or you can say yes to all of them. I'll leave that up to you. But those 7 players are Keith Smith, the fullback, Olamide Zaccheaus, Caleb McGarry, Elijah Wilkinson, Lorenzo Carter, Rashaan Evans, Isaiah Oliver. So, Jarvis, who on that list has earned a new contract from the Falcons, in your opinion?
Wow, the first guy, I never thought I'd be saying this, is the obvious one, is Caleb McGarry. Like, I think the conversation needs to be had as to what that number looks like. I think that's going to be the big factor as to whether or not they bring him back. What number is he looking for? And I think that because my main concern is guys are work out and get ready and get tuned up for that contract year, right? Hey, now I want to get right. Now I see my issues. Now here I'm going to work on all these things so I can get paid. So, okay, now you're telling me that once you get that money, you say you're going to continue to do that and continue to, make yourself make that contract justifiable in your mind. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So I think that I would proceed with caution, but he is a guy that I feel that in 2022, I feel like Caleb McGarry is a guy that earned the contract. But the second guy that stands out to me on that list is definitely Isaiah Oliver. I think Isaiah Oliver, when he was healthy, the guy played a doggone good job, man. He's a versatile player. He has been a good tackler, a solid tackler since day one. But I think that, coming in and drafting the second round by the previous regime, I think that he struggled a lot on that outside corner spot. And Dean P said, you know what? Let's move him down to nickel. Let's see what he can do. And when you think about a guy of his size, a guy of his ilk down inside in today's game, you need a little size on that nickel, right? Because most of the times teams get you in that nickel spot and they try to run the football. So you're going to need somebody in there that may be able to take on the block and get off and make a solid tackle. So I really, really like him in that nickel spot. And you kind of be a little versatile with him and move him around in the safety and give you a safety look, not necessarily playing the safety spot, but give you a safety look to give a little different look to the opposing quarterback. So I think Isaiah Oliver is a guy that's earned the contract. And Rashaan Evans, now, wow. I'm not quite sure about Rashaan. I have to give him an incomplete because now he made a lot of tackles. Don't get me wrong, but it just seems sometimes he seems to get a little lost in coverage from time to time, and I think that's the group has done that linebacker core. And I know you've tweeted about those their transgressions on Sundays as well at 1:00. But I think that might be something I'll have a little resolve with. So I guess I'm saying no, but I'm not quite saying no on him. As far as Keith Smith, obviously, yes. Arthur Smith likes fullbacks. Bring him back. I think he's a guy that has definitely earned another contract. Olamide Zaccheaus is an interesting one to me because I really feel like Desmond Ridder didn't really gain any type of chemistry with him. I really feel like he's a guy that you can count on from a third option standpoint, but I'm not quite sure he's a guy that they bring back. Obviously, if he's willing to take a different a very financially responsible contract, yeah, we had that conversation. I wouldn't be upset if they brought him back, but I think that that's something that, and then also, my guy, I guess he's my guy, Lorenzo Carter. Is he's the guy that I feel if you have to bring him back, that means that the Falcons didn't draft well. Or I feel like if they're having serious conversations with him, that means that they might be looking to go another way that I will be highly upset that they go.
Okay. I hear you on all those. I don't necessarily disagree too strongly with any of those picks. I would probably, of this 7-man group, I would be like, Oliver's the one that has to come back of this group, but the rest, I could take, I could go either way on a lot of these other guys. It's like how much are we paying this guy? Maybe I don't know if I want to pay that. It's that kind of situation. It's like, the rent's too high on some of those guys. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, Oliver is interesting because we saw a little bit, as you talked about, him kind of playing a little safety. He was about 15, 16 snaps that he was playing as a safety, subbing in for Jalen Hawkins. I know one of the listeners asked me a question about that he wanted to get answered on the Q&A, and I didn't have time to get to that. But that's something that is an interesting wrinkle that Dean Pease has sort of been teasing since the summer. We finally got to see it, a more extended look at that in that Arizona Cardinals game. And we'll see if we'll see a more extended look of that, in week 18 and hopefully, heading into 2023, because Oliver is one of those guys that I certainly think definitely should be back 100%. Everybody else, ranges between, let's say, 40 and 70% or something like that. I'm like, we'll see. But obviously we'll talk a lot more about some of these impending free agents. We'll talk a lot more with Jarvis about ways that we can improve the pass rush. I know Jarvis is chomping at the bit to really dive into that this offseason. So we'll continue to have Jarvis on the podcast all the way up to the draft so that we can get there on draft night, and then we can just complain about the Falcons taking a skill position player.
Yeah. Jordan Addison, here you go. Black and red, baby.
It is an annual tradition, right?
Quentin Johnston, probably. I'm sorry. Did I mess the man's name up? Quincy or Quentin? Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnson. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
We'll get some practice in for
Go ahead and get the basketball team ready, man. Sorry.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us here. We got one more game left to play. Hopefully the Falcons take care of business. Desmond Ridder, goes out there and outduels the GOAT in Tom Brady on Sunday, but we'll be back on Sunday afternoon to break it all down on that Locked On Sports Atlanta postcast on YouTube. And of course, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta and Locked On NFL so that you can make them your second listen after you've made Locked On Falcons your first listen. Guys, really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Till then.